Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in business and future affairs, market watch, industries, analysis and insights. We've got you covered right here on Niaga Spotlight. Well, today on Future Affairs, we're looking at all things plastic. Now, the fascinating thing about plastics is while they pervade our daily environment, it has increasingly become a concern. What with microplastics being in the headlines recently, and let me share a couple of interesting stats about where Malaysia is and how we're doing. I've got some not so great news for us. Firstly, Malaysia actually ranks as the 5th global plastic polluter of the oceans and actually highest amongst 6 countries in Southeast Asia, and this is in terms of annual per capita plastic packaging consumption. So of course, environmental problems linked to responsible and sustainable disposal and recycling of plastic are naturally a concern. And globally, in fact, only around 9% of our plastic output actually is recycled at all. So all of these issues give us a very interesting boatload to get into in depth, and I have the absolute pleasure of having joining me live in the studios today for Niaga Spotlight, Seah Kian Hoe, who is the founder as well as managing director for Heng Hiap Industries, HHI, Sdn Bhd. Kian, so good to have you, and especially thanks to your jet set schedule, you are actually here straight off a couple of very interesting conferences in Europe. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me here, Tamina. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So, Kian, let's get started off by perhaps you telling us a little bit about HHI's origins and how it is that you moved quite quickly into an interest in plastics and then realizing not just the recycling potential, but for commercialization of these recycled products.
Sure. Try to make it quick. I basically was introduced to this industry at a young age of 10. You know, my parents were collecting recyclable from household to household. The Buri Surakaba guys, buy old newspaper guys.
That's right.
Both
that's right.
my mom and dad were collecting recyclable from household to household. So very quickly we go from a mobile picker, yard owner, processor, and finally aggregator. So today we are one of the 2 largest metal scrap and paper scrap supplier to local steel mills and paper mills. And for me, I started HHI 22 years ago.
Right.
So when we first went into this industry, it is very fragmented. Yeah. The industry is broken into 6 independent businesses, namely, company A is doing collection, B is doing sorting, crushing, washing, mixing, final extrusion. Because of that fragmentation, HHI decided to integrate the entire process so that we can get much better consistency, and therefore we can scale up, to convert plastic scrap into standardized material to be specced in, and mainly to support exporting market.
Fantastic. So it's been a very, I would say, fast-paced journey, even though it began 22 years ago, which was around 2002, right?
Correct.
So standing here now in 2024, and also on the tail end of what was basically sort of like a global shutdown for around 4 years related to the pandemic, and of course, conferences, R&D, development, would you say that really impacted the recyclable and the plastics industry in general? And how have you all been able to catch up with that gap that was left due to the pandemic years?
Correct. I think the pandemic time was actually a nice pause, to the industry. In fact, the development never stopped. In fact, during that time, in terms of sustainability, there were a lot of initiative. Sustainability was actually moving faster.
Sure.
During pandemic.
Because people were so hyper aware, I would say.
Exactly. And everybody was in the office. Decision get made very, very quickly. It was very, very focused. So in fact, it was actually moving faster during pandemic. So during that period of time, it's also a little bit of a focus that is more human-centric. And that's what I really like. Before that, the entire plastic industry was all about making things faster, better, prettier, cheaper. But suddenly, with the pandemic coming in, everyone started to think about, how do we make the entire industry more human-centric? And that ties in really nicely with sustainability.
Exactly, because what I'm hearing when it comes to production and materials, etc., that also means consumption. But
Correct.
of course, HHI's mission is more about using the plastic that is already there to create something that is infinitely usable in a sense, right? Tell me more about this ethos and also the fact that you are also ocean-bound plastic certified.
Okay. Try to keep this simple.
Sure.
So on my side here, so basically for me personally, I do not believe in plastic pollution. This
Okay.
terminology of plastic pollution, fundamentally I don't believe in that. I believe in plastic ignorance, simply because we don't understand the inherent property of plastic
Right.
after consumption, an empty bottle, for example. So if you give us an empty bottle, we start to look into what is the inherent mechanical property. Yeah?
Okay.
So before and after consumption is the same. We look into the thermal property, meaning the calories that trap within that plastic itself or inherent embedded within the plastic itself. Before and after consumption, same. And then we
Right.
look at it from a chemical, from the chemical property point of view, that essentially everything is hydrocarbon, hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. So
Fair
there are a
enough.
lot of things that we can attract there. So then it is, for HHI, we then try to find a way to create value from all this plastic scrap that a lot of people do not understand. So we have been doing, collecting and recycling land-based plastic, and we collect up to 60,000 tons a year within Malaysia only, and we export to 39 different countries. So that's something that we're doing at this point of time. 2019, right before pandemic, we start to see that marine pollution was populating headlines. And
Absolutely.
then in order to be a protector and to fight marine pollution,
Right.
we decided to extend our integrated model, which was previously land-based, to ocean-bound, so that it can allow us to collect and clean up, all this shore and ocean plastic that has been unfortunately leaking to the ocean. So it becomes a very, very interesting journey, because we realize it is a lot more challenging due to the complexity of it, and each and every time when we do an ocean cleanup activity, the quality and the quantity we're collecting, it's very inconsistent and relatively
Right.
small, and that impact the cost or the economics of it.
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. And what I actually really enjoyed from what you've shared, Kian, is the fact that you deem it plastic ignorance, not pollution. Because that brings me back to the fact that, well, inherently a plastic bottle, whether it's something that you're currently drinking from, or it's been cast aside on the road, or it's bobbing along in a river, it's not bad per se, right? So now, the fact remains, though, that it takes, roughly 450 years for that one little bottle to break down. So let's talk about the fact that, as you shared, now HHI, of course, you're exporting to 39 countries. We hope you get to that big 50 very soon.
Working
So
on it.
there's clearly a demand for such sustainable products that come from pre-existing plastic, then perfectly packaged into the consumer needs. So tell us more about basically moving forward. How has understandings about circular plastic supply chains also increased? Because there's clearly a lot of work happening, not so much behind the scenes, but it may be something which is only some that experts in your industry are aware of as developments go.
I think, as consumer, we probably would not see, all this effort behind the scene, as you put it. But quietly, since pandemic, we actually have seen a very strong positive undercurrent, if you will.
Right.
Everyone is really looking into how do we design, our material differently, simply because we understand that we cannot continue to have business as usual, whereby we make the plastic product, we consume the plastic product, and then we dispose it. It's simply too costly,
That's right.
to support this linear consumption pattern. So there are a lot of great initiative to study, to redesign the material so that we're using the minimum weight in our packaging. In the past, we have multi-layers. Now it's just mono-layers. Even increasingly, as you start to travel, you will start to see that the mineral water bottle comes without a label.
Correct.
So all these initiatives are simplifying as such so that when we recycle that, we can recycle that very effectively. And the most exciting part of it is that we have countries that are starting to adopt a minimum usage of recycled content in their packaging product. California as a state will basically dictate that 25% of recycled content must be included in all packaging material by 2025. So things are speeding up really quickly. The states, other states are following through, including EU are studying something similar like that, even with a more aggressive goal of much higher recycled content. So things are all, coming together in a positive way, the way I look at it.
That's absolutely what it sounds like, but also looking at the historical both profitability and also the burden that lies with Southeast Asia. Firstly, of course, we were rubber producing and are rubber producing. That naturally made us hot zones for producing plastic. In the early years, about 60 years ago, that was boom town, right?
Yeah.
So now how do we turn the clock and the attention for Asian economies, for Malaysia also, to have a chance to be a leader in this industry of circular plastic supply chains? We've already become more of a focus for a various number of global supply chains due to the pandemic, geopolitical risk, etc., etc. How do we make this the next big boom?
I like that question. So you're absolutely right. Malaysia, I always say that Malaysia, we're not a big country. We are not a small country either.
That's right. Just nice, that sweet spot in the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that at the right time, we should make our voices heard, so to speak. If we talk about plastic recycling or national plastic recycling rate, in developed country, we will start to see that developed countries are very good with top-down approach. They have a good national recycling program or regulation. Then there's the infrastructure to support that and engagement to make that work for top-down. Our government continue on that journey, but for HHI, while waiting and encouraging to see that's happening, HHI as a company, together with our community, we are trying to create a bottom-up approach. So what we have done is that we activated the independent plastic recycling community. That is 28,000 of us here in Malaysia.
Wow. In Malaysia?
In Malaysia
28,000, okay, all right.
Right, and then we are collecting recyclable, and these are all the, bio newspaper guys,
yes, absolutely. Consolidating everybody.
Exactly, so we go from, mobile picker, yard owner, processor, and aggregator.
Right.
Now, along the way, we actually track, all the ESG-related mileage, and then along the way, we start to process and convert the material based on the standard that HHI has shared as the de facto industrial standard. And with that, we could actually kickstart something that's very exciting this year. So this year, we kickstart a 4M program.
All right.
So the 4M program basically says 100% collect in Malaysia, 100% recycle in Malaysia, 100% made in Malaysia for Malaysians.
Okay, so collect, recycle, made, and for
Malaysia.
everything within Malaysia
itself.
Okay,
so
closing that loop.
Closing that loop. So
Right.
we're trying to showcase that the local circularity is possible. So we're working with big brands on that. So for example, we are also collecting from schools. So we collect the lunch boxes, the recycled plastic from schools. We then recycle in HHI. We work with big international brands, to convert that into furniture. And then when we give the pen back to the school, the kids are bringing the pen and show their parents and say, see, circularity works. Our lunch boxes that we've been collecting and then sending to the schools are converted into the barrel of this pen, and this pen is 100% recycled.
Fantastic.
So those are our next generation of plastic neutrality, believers, and they are the ones that make it happen.
Exactly. I love the fact that what you're talking about, everything, it sounds to me like not just economic opportunity, but a way to be genuinely sustainable in the businesses that people are doing. If you don't mind telling me a little bit about the Next Wave Plastics Consortium, which HHI has also been a part of since November last year.
Yeah. So again, this is again another one of these interesting phenomena that we are working together. So this is actually a group, a consortium founded in US, and you have some of the big brands like Dell, HP, so on and so forth.
Sure.
There has been, putting all these brands together, you have some really high-profile champions coming together to fight marine pollution. So what we do then is that in the past, our role is just supplier. As a supplier, they only talk to us about two subjects. What is the specification? And then what is the price? And then we are done. But now with Next Wave, what we are talking about is how do we redesign the entire plastic life cycle. So we actually got a seat on the table to look at it from a recycler's point of view to say that, hey, if we are going to reinvent the entire life cycle from a linear life cycle to a circular one, these are the things that we could actually include to redesign the entire product. It's a really, really exciting time to be part of Next Wave.
Absolutely. It sounds like, well, this is indeed the next step, and how it will turn out is actually going to impact how plastics and the face of the planet is going to look like over the next 50 years. All right, Kian, absolutely fascinating conversation. We do take a quick brief break though. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us right here on Niaga Spotlight. We'll be back in a jiffy. Welcome back to Niaga Spotlight, still with me, Tamina Kausji, and today, of course, we've been discussing purposeful plastic and circular plastic supply chains with Seah Kian Hoe, who's founder and managing director of Heng Hiap Industries, Sdn Bhd. So Kian, getting right back into the conversation. Now, I love the fact that you were talking about earlier, school children being able to take a pen back home and say, hey, this used to be a lunchbox, right? But at the same time, of course, we've got, and I think especially as we say, and there's a lot of jokes that go around as, little cute reels on social media about the Asian mom thing, keeping lots of plastics in basically recycling everything from plastic bags to plastic containers, Tupperware, you being surprised to open up a Wall's ice cream box but it having frozen chicken inside. So that's, I think, reusing has actually been a part of the way in which we as individual and family consumers do function in our society. How do we move to upscaling that to a much more community and social level so that the recycling is not just the reusing but also repurposing?
Yeah, I think that sounds, as an amazing plan. So for us, we roll out, different campaign, so to speak. So one of the things that we try to educate is on, plastic neutrality, within a society. Within a society, Malaysian, we use 76 kilogram of plastic per capita per year.
Right.
Yeah. So
staggering.
Exactly. But what we are trying to see is to achieve the neutrality. It's not so much of how much plastic you use, but it is how much you recycle as well. So you balance it off. So if you hit that neutrality status, then it's okay to do that. So we work with school to schools, taman to taman, to collect the recycled plastic, and we do a statistics to show them which taman is more sustainable than the other. And the minute we gamify it like that, it's very interesting. We start to see the numbers to skyrocket. So these are the things that currently we are working with communities. The idea is really to get into the plastic neutrality status. And that is just, for certain community. But there are certain other community that are more there are some other community to us are more important because it adds on to their livelihood. So for example, we have a fisherman's program whereby when they're not fishing during the monsoon season, they're collecting plastic for us and then we pay them. So increasingly we are also tracking, how has their income increased over time.
And that sounds so interesting to me because, of course, outside of just our Klang Valley bubble, so to speak, there are increasing plastic pollution pressures per se, particularly in Sabah and Sarawak, whereby Gaya Island, for example, visibly speaking at least, all that can, as far as the eye can see beyond luxury resorts, is the fact that there is a whole lot of plastic, mostly because of a lack of access to water and resources, etc. Any ideas, Kian, about how that can be approached in such communities whereby we have already seen great and fantastic returns from encouraging monetization for gathering, let's say, 1 kilo of plastic, right? But how can that be sustainable? How can we encourage perhaps the opening of full-scale facilities that are modern and sophisticated enough that the next tropical storm isn't going to destroy them?
It's all, one baby step at a time, one small step at a time. You're absolutely right about Sabah Sarawak. In fact, we bring in the ocean-bound plastic scrap all the way from Mantanani Island, Sabah. So we actually work with the NGOs to collect the ocean-bound plastic material, and then we bale them, we ship them, to Johor Bahru, whereby we convert everything into a specialized material, which is being certified by the ocean-bound plastic certification.
Understood.
So that is very important. In fact, HHI is the first company in the world to be certified with a zero plastic ocean-bound plastic certification. Now that actually showcase the traceability and also the authenticity, and we are able to sell at a higher price, and that help us to support our initiative like this. So we start working with them, and the minute we start collecting from all this resort, mostly island specific, and by the way, we have approximately 800 islands in Malaysia.
That's right.
And working with them, that actually helps us to collect this. The minute they start to collect the recycled plastic, they also become a buyer of recycled plastic material or products. So now we are working collaboration, same with the 4M, project that we are supplying, crates, basically plastic product that they are using at this point of time. Although right now it's still, West Malaysia, East Malaysia kind of commute at this point of time, we are also starting to localize that and creating a smaller footprint along the way. So that's also something we're doing.
Yeah, the economic buy-in is what sounds most promising to me, because once you have communities who are also depending on this, not just for their livelihood, it also increases the interest in ensuring sustainability of the business model.
That's absolutely right. And also in the process, we are also automating. We're introducing a lot more high tech in the space, So I think being 22 years in the business, we have enough data to help us to automate, to simplify. Not to mention that going forward for the industry, it is very important for us to be a lot more efficient, less labor dependent or foreign labor dependent, and more automation, and then make it lighter and more simplified so that we can deploy the solution. And along the way, we are also collecting data. So a lot of interesting things are happening. So
it sounds like
an
octopus.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So moving from there and casting the net even wider, Kian, as we move towards closing out the conversation. Now the recent UNEA 5, which was the UN Environment Assembly, happened in Nairobi. Now over there, the most interesting takeaway was, of course, talking about the End Plastic Pollution to form an international legally binding agreement by 2024. So basically looking at the Global Plastics Treaty, or GPT 2030, what are your thoughts on not just the stakeholdership which countries like Malaysia ought to take, but also, because this is going to be something legally binding, what mechanisms, strategies can we also already put in place? We shouldn't have to be just following a global treaty. Of course, we will be signatory to it. We've had representatives from the corroborating ministries, etc., speaking and advocating at that level. Your thoughts?
Sure. Maybe I'll step back a little bit about, simplifying, this entire agenda, so to speak.
Yes, please.
So I think what this Global Plastic Treaty believes is that GPT believes in a plastic-free society. I mean, it's a bit extreme. So basically, let's just shut off the tap. Let's just stop production in
Okay, let's make it to zero.
Let's make it to zero. I mean, towards that direction. Not exactly
Right.
yet, but let's make it to zero. And I think then we will live in a plastic-free society, that we don't see plastic anymore. It's moving towards that direction, and I'll share with you my thoughts slightly after. But for HHI, we talk about this internally. We always think about, fast forward 50 years from now, what's the
Right.
relationship between plastic and society?
Yes.
So we either live in a plastic-free society, where GPT is moving towards, or a plastic-neutral society. HHI, we believe in plastic-neutral society. And I think that's what we are going to, that's what everything that HHI is doing is moving towards plastic neutrality. Now, I still am supportive of GPT. The reason being that, fundamentally, before anything, we always need to go back to 3R, like what you were mentioning earlier on. We always want to think about how do we reduce, how do we reuse, and how do we recycle. So more often than not, we need all three. It would not be just one that can fix this very complex problem. So the first GPT might be moving towards that direction. However, I believe there will be a GPT 2.0, 3.0 to come, whereby it will then start to pivot towards neutrality.
Understood.
First we reduce,
Sure.
then we reuse, then we talk about recycling. Simply because a plastic-free society is expensive to live in, because
Fair.
the substitute is going to be very expensive unless all of us are going to compensate on development, quality of living, so on and so forth. We believe in neutrality simply because that's the way we can continue to grow as a planet together and at the least minimal environmental load that's possible.
That's right. I think minimal environmental load, that really is the key. And perhaps it is the anxiety of the visible plastic pollution that
Correct.
has, of course, become a lot more part of news headlines. So, well noted on that. So let's look at the fact that in closing out the discussion, continuing this kind of business as usual attitude, of course, would actually mean that plastics will be contributing up to 19% of global greenhouse gases, the GHG targets by 2040. So the GPT is, of course, looking at cutting production and setting extended producer responsibility targets. But what kind of investments are actually needed to be able to see this happen, particularly for a country like Malaysia and a region like Southeast Asia as well, where plastic production kind of also goes quite hand in hand with the very thriving economy of those who recycle plastics.
Well, let's talk about Malaysia. Malaysia, we are a oil production country.
Yes, we are.
And we are very strong in oil-related and supporting industry. So this is very vital for us as an industry. You're absolutely right. 19%, that's a big number if we talk about the carbon contribution as a whole world. And definitely we have to do something about it. And looking at plastic, I mean, just use this simple cap as an example.
Sure.
If 19% goes into the plastic industry, for a single use, we make, we use, and then after that we throw it again, then 19% is very big. But if we look at plastic, plastic has a lot of advantages and disadvantages that we know. But plastic has one magical advantage that many people do not know, which is each and every time when plastic change its shape and
Right.
form, it creates value. Yeah. So crude oil, someone creates value means someone pay for it. When crude oil, you make it into naphtha oil, someone pays for it, and then you make it into resin material, someone pays for it. You make it into product, someone pays for it, and then when it's being consumed in collector bags, someone pays for it. You crush it, someone pays for it, and then you separate it, wash it, and then you make it into recycled material. Along the way, someone pays for it, as long as you are changing the shape and form. Plastic
Very
material.
true.
Yeah.
So plasticity, in a sense, in action, right?
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
So,
Okay,
so
love that.
you can recycle this plastic, 7 times rule of thumb, depending on the environment, of course,
Right.
5 to
So
7
seven
times.
times.
7
This
times.
one little bottle cap.
This one little bottle cap.
Okay.
So you recycle that mechanically 7 times. After 7 times, the molecular structure collapses.
I see.
So you cannot recycle that anymore. Then you go into a chemical recycling that you convert everything into naphtha oil again. So once it's naphtha oil, you make into new plastic material again, but this time without any crude oil base. It comes from recycled plastic. That 7 plus 1 cycle can technically go on forever.
Understood.
So now let's come back to the 19%. With the 19%, if we're using single use, divided by 1. But if I go through that 8 cycle, then it's divided by 8. But if that 8 cycle can go on forever, then I can divide that indefinitely.
It's an infinite number of different configurations and
Correct.
loops,
And then
essentially.
suddenly
Okay.
that 19 becomes very, very small, and that's how we achieve sustainability. And that's why, I think collectively, how, with the producer and consumer and government and everybody play a role to basically juggle this plastic, in the air,
That's
so
right.
that we can create that perfect loop whereby plastic continue to change its form and shape and continue to serve humanity for our growth. And collectively, when we can give plastic a circular life, then that's how we reduce the overall environmental load.
Perfect nutshell. Kian, thank you so much for not just your time, but also your insights. I'm sure we've all learned a lot from that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we have time for today on Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. We'll see you next Friday with more business analysis and insights. Here's to a productive week ahead.